Hello, denizens of the internet, and welcome back to my channel. This is Kira Una behind the camera, and today I will be showing you how to use a domestic sewing machine if you have never stitched a stitch in your life before. Editing Kira here. Before we get started, I just wanted to advise you that this will be a mini-series produced over time to help beginners in identifying parts of a domestic sewing machine, as well as how to use it to make just about anything. I may go into words like thingy or stuff to describe something, like a part or technique, because my brain can't process the word at the time of recording. But I will try my best to make sure that I put the correct descriptor or term on the screen. All of my machines are Singer branded. However, this video is not endorsed or sponsored by the Singer brand company of sewing machine. I have used other brands, makes, and models before to help with context. And now, on to the tutorial. You may have been the type of person who were like, I want to pick up sewing, and you bought a machine at the store. This is one that might have been recommended on somewhere like Reddit or YouTube, or pick somewhere where you have seen a domestic sewing machine. It may not necessarily be new as this one is. It may be slightly older model. It may be a vintage model. It may be a semi-newer model that was handed down that's maybe a couple of years old. This is the ideal shape and construction of most modern machines for domestic use, and I will be showing you how to use this specific model today, but most sewing machines are built about the same way, with the exception of anything that's digital. This particular machine is what is called a mechanical machine. There are different types of mechanical machines. This one is specifically for home sewing and domestic use. However, that is not to say that you can't run a business off of said sewing machine if you happen to have one. I have a lot of Singer brand sewing machines in my house. In fact, all of the machines that I have are Singer brand. With that being said, this is essentially a heavy duty sewing machine. They call it heavy duty because the inside has a lot of more metal parts than plastic. The outer body is a heavier, solid plastic outer body shell with a stainless steel faceplate and working space. With that being said, it does not necessarily mean that it's better than the machine that you may have picked up. There are a lot of vintage machines that are out there that work perfectly fine. You may have picked up a $150 special at like Walmart or Michael's or wherever. That does not exclude that your machine would not work the same. I am going to be primarily focusing on the elements of the machine that 99.9% of machines have in the way that they're made. So essentially that would include a basic zigzag stitch, a straight stitch, the stitch length, needle position, and the tension. So I have done a video previously on tensioning your machine. We can get into that a little bit later. If you want to, you can preview that now. You just have to find it in my channel. I will link to it somewhere down below so that you can see. There are multiple different working parts to a sewing machine, but most of them are functionally the same and will operate the same. So I'm going to go through each one of those for you in a moment. To start off with, we have our stitch selector. So we have a whole bunch of fancy stitches. Some older machines may only do straight or zigzag or straight stitch only. It really depends on your make and model and when it was made. With this particular machine, I have straight stitch, zigzag stitch, a couple of funky stretch stitches. This one is an overcast, so I've got hemming and sort of this serge stitch. I honestly don't remember what this one is called. We've got a blanket stitch, again some stretch stitches, some fancy decorative stitches. I do like this scalloped one, might I add. And the same thing with the rest of them, and this one is for buttonholes. The next dial that we have here is the stitch length. This will determine how long or how short your stitch is, each stitch the machine makes. So between 0 and 1 you want, again, the buttonhole diagram here to denotate that this is for buttonholes. S1 is any of the stitches that you see here that's in blue. S2 for any of the ones that you see here on these dials that are red. And then black is for the ones that are in black that you see on the dial here. The black stitches are your typical everyday use, you'll use them almost every project type of stitches. The other two are for stretch or decorative or just fancy. And then if we take a look at the top of the machine, we have our stitch width. This typically denotes how wide your stitches are going to be. More commonly used specifically for either the buttonhole stitches if required, or for the zigzag stitch, as you can see diagrammed here. Then we have the needle position. It's very clearly labeled, which is this one, which if you rotate it, it will change the position of where the needle sits when you're doing your sewing. So this is centered, this is to the right, and then this is to the left. Tension dial, which is demonstrated here, as to how tight the top stitching will be compared to the bottom. This only tensions the top dial. The bottom one on this particular machine, I don't believe is ever meant supposed to be tightened or loosened unless necessary. I still have to read the instruction manual on how to do that because I'm not used to doing it on this particular style. So the one where you take it out from underneath the machine, that one I do know how to tension, and I made a video on how to go about doing solving your tension problems. You may want to check that out on my channel. And then with all the other diagrams, it shows you how and in what order to thread your machine. And then we have a couple of other things here on top. We have our bobbin spooler, and you can see the bobbin diagram as to how it's threaded when you go to use it. And you have your thread spool, one of two, or at least on this particular model, for domestic thread spools like this one, which can sit right on top. Now looking at the other parts of the sewing machine, we also have a secondary thread spooler here, which this little grommet will hold the spool on, and it gets threaded like so. Granted, this spool is a little big for that threader, so I recommend using the stand-up one. But this is also a spot for smaller spools of thread, but it can also be used for double stitching if you know how to do it without ruining your machine. I would highly recommend that if you do use more than one spool, that you double check your instruction manual before you do so. You don't want to break your machine. Now coming around to the right side of the machine first, we have our hand wheel. So this will forward the needle and the feed dogs if you need to really go slow for super precise work, or just to get your needle out of your work while you're working. So if you have to take the garment or whatever you're sewing out of the machine, or if you just need to use it to replace the needle to get it into the resting position, is what I like to call it. And of course, with most machines, especially the more modern ones, when electricity was available, we have our power cord. For this model, this machine strictly runs on electricity. There are other models that do not require electricity, but it depends on the make, the model, and the age of your machine. And this part here is the foot pedal. This is the part that if the machine was on, that when you push down on it with your foot, the faster your machine will go. So if you only press on it lightly, it'll only move a couple of stitches. If you put your foot down, it'll just go like gas on a car. Driving your sewing machine is very much like driving a car, so the more you push down, the faster it will go. Okay, and we have the back of the machine. So we have the make, model, serial number, etc. on that sticker over there by the power cord. And then we have this piece, which is the presser foot lever. So when you put that down, you'll notice it lowers the presser foot and then raises it again. What this also does is when you lower the presser foot, this also tensions the tension discs on the inside of the machine for where your thread goes. That way you have a consistent, even stitch tension. And then coming to the dead center of the machine, you have, again, your threading instructions. Your tension discs are probably somewhere in here. So just so that you're aware, on this particular style, that's where they would be located. I will take photos of my other machine to show you on a vintage one where your tension dial would be. For this particular model, you also have a handy dandy reverse button. Typically that will help you to make knots in your work so that the seam does not come undone. On certain vintage machines, like my 1937 Singer machine, there is no reverse. You have to physically turn your work around and then go backwards in order to make that knot. This, on modern machines, will do it for you. So I'm going to thread this machine with this red thread, and we're going to use the top here. And this is so you can distinguish what you're seeing on the video from the top thread versus the bottom thread. And we're going to follow the directions on the top of the machine how to thread this machine. Now, this won't be necessarily the easiest to see from this angle. I will take a photo and show a top-down view in a moment, but we're going to take our thread. As you can see, it unwinds from the bobbin. Well, it unwinds from the spool if you just pull on it. What you want to do is you want to have this really set close so that this does not move, but you also want to put your hand on it so it doesn't unravel on you as you're threading the machine. And give yourself a really good lead up. So we're going to put it through this tension hook first. Then it goes through the arm here. Follow 3 down below. Lead to 4, up and around. 5 is this bar here, so that comes back up and around, comes back down for number 6. Then there's this hook here at the needle screw. Then when we come back down to the needle, we have another hook that's just under here. It's really hard, you can't really see it from this angle, but there is one. Like so. And then this particular model has the needle being threaded from front to back. And this is the top of the machine. So you have your thread spool, you have your needle position, your tension. This is your tension for the bobbin itself, for when you have to spool up another bobbin for a different color. And this is your presser foot tension. So if you need the presser foot tighter or looser, that is what this is for. I generally don't use this very often, but sometimes I will. It really depends on what project I'm doing. Now, before I actually thread the needle, I'm going to get my tea, and then I'm going to show you how to install the needle. Alright, now for those of you who are wondering, why am I filming from this specific angle? This is the exact angle, if I was actually sewing something, what I would normally see on a day-to-day basis, day in and day out. So knowing where things are on the machine really helps, so then that way you don't necessarily have to see what you're doing to know when it's threaded properly. With that said, I'm going to show you how to uninstall and reinstall the needle. So there is a needle screw here. You can use a screwdriver to make it tighter or looser. There is a little groove on the side over here that you can't really see, but I'm sticking my nail into it. That comes undone. I usually only hand tighten for domestic machines. If you don't have a lot of hand strength, I suggest using a screwdriver. Now, I also have a coding system that I personally use. It's not going to be the same for everybody. Essentially, I have it denotated as to what type of needle it is based on the color that I use. I just use a little Sharpie on the top to tell me what type of needle it is. For most, like, I would say about 85% of domestic sewing machines, and this is domestic, not sergers, and not industrial. It will have a shank here that is flat on the back of the needle. You can see it there. Now, I have red as being for sharps, which is for a woven type of fabric, not knitted or stretchy. So I have my little sample piece that I'll be using to demonstrate how to feed fabric into the machine in a bit. So I'm going to stick with a sharp woven needle. And there is a little hole that it goes into to hold it in place, and that flat part goes towards the back of the machine. Now, I will give you a caveat that on my vintage machine, the eye of the needle does not go front to back. It goes side to side. And the throat of the needle, which is the back side, goes towards the machine itself on that specific model. For this one, of the eye of the needle is front to back. So the really, really curved part goes towards the back. The slightly flatter part goes towards the front. The shank, which is the upper part of the needle, the flat back goes towards the back on this specific model. Everybody's model is going to be different. Double check your instruction manual. You can probably find that on Manuals Lib or elsewhere depending on your make and model. That is something that you may have to Google to find if it's not available through the company that sends you the machine or where you bought it from in the first place. This particular model did not come with an instruction manual. It said check it out online. I hope they realize that not everyone has access to the internet and that print methods should still be available for quick reference, especially like here. This is me just sort of side tangenting a little bit, but my serger has a printed copy and I use it all the time. In fact, it sits on the shelf that's sitting above the sewing machine here, where all the lights are attached. I don't think I have used my serger without at least referring to the instruction manual at least once. For this style of machine, I have used so many different makes, models, companies, and styles that I inherently know how 9 times out of 10 it's threaded. But because you're a beginner, I'm assuming that this is why you clicked on this video, you probably won't know, so please refer to your instruction manual. I would highly recommend that you print a copy. So then that way you can have it beside you, pull it up when you need it, and it's like, okay, this is how you use this function. Because a lot of these instruction manuals will also tell you the best methods to use all of those stitches for. Anyhow, tangent over, let's get back to threading the rest of this. Where I left off is we have the thread that came down through to the little sort of thread guide here, just above the needle. Now we're going to thread the needle itself. There is sometimes on newer machines a needle threader. I have never used this thing. I don't know how to use it. I just generally don't need to. You can use it if you require it. Some people do, some people don't. I don't. What I tend to do is I do it by eye. So you will notice I have not wet or licked this thread at all. There is a very tiny, teeny groove that is on the needle itself that runs in front of the eye to form the eye of the needle. You can take the end of a freshly cut piece of thread like I have here and run that groove, run the thread into the groove, and it will generally help you to guide the thread into the eye of the needle. I'm struggling a little bit because I have a camera in my face. See, this is the one time that I should actually know how to use a threader. Otherwise I wouldn't struggle so much. Sorry, the camera's shaking because I need to see what I'm doing.
One eternity later.
Here we go. And keep in mind, industrial machines won't have a threader. Or at least most industrial machines. The ones that I have at school don't. Now, again, the first thing I'm going to say, not all machines are created equal. If you need to know how to thread your bobbin, make sure you consult your instruction manual. Almost all machines will have a way of doing so. So then that way you have a top and a bottom thread. There is the occasional rare circumstance where you have a chain stitch machine, but that is not typical of a domestic machine. There are a couple that were intended for kids back in the 50s. I would love to get my hands on a Singer 51 or 50, but I don't have that kind of money to get one, and the needles are hard to find for it as well. So, but with that said, enough conjecture about vintage machines that I would love to have in my repertoire. I'm going to show you how to thread a bobbin. So you have a bobbin peg, which is right here. Bobbin goes onto said peg, like that. You want to make sure that it's past, like it clips into the spring and it can't go any further down. There is a little spring that will help to hold it on, keep tension, and so on. Like so. You want to unthread your needle, and while holding your thread down so it doesn't go anywhere, you are going to take your thread, put it through the first slot, which is this thread hook here. Then you are going to follow the instructions either on the machine, which this one says to go towards the person on the right side, and loop to the back on the left. This is your tension. And you typically want to put it underneath the tension springs. There's a little spring in there, and then this sits, see how it's got tension? I know it might be hard to see, but that is what's going to keep the tension to create an even threading of the bobbin itself. So you want to have the thread under that spring. So again, you're going to come from the front, flip it underneath, and hook around, keeping the thread inside that spring. Now there's holes on the bobbin, typically. There are some industrial machines that don't have those holes, which makes threading your bobbin a little tricky. So there's like 2 holes on this side, there's 2 holes on top and bottom. On the metal ones, there's usually holes all the way around. Again, double check to make sure that you have the right bobbin for your machine, because not all bobbins are created equal and not all machines take the same type. There are multiple types. There's industrial, there is Singer 15, I believe it's what this style is called, in both metal and plastic. This one actually came with the machine. And then there's Class 66, which has a slightly domed edge. I will pop a picture of what a Class 66 looks like somewhere around here in editing. So we threaded from the spool through to the first thread guide, around the spring, which is just over here off screen, and we're going to thread. So we're going to hold the thread here so it doesn't go anywhere. We're going to put it through the first thread guide. We're going to loop it into the tension spring. We're going to loop it in the direction it says to on the machine, which is from the right, going down around the front and coming back out around the left and to the back. Then we're going to loop the end of the thread into one of these holes. So it's in the hole, and we're going to stick this on the peg. And on this machine, they say to put the spool to the boards, like the eye of the spool towards the back, and we're going to shove it over to lock it into place. And we're going to hold the thread straight up, and then we're going to give it some power. You want the thread to spool as evenly as you can get it onto the bobbin itself. So if it's feeding too heavy and on the bottom, you want to sort of nudge it with your finger, or in my case I'm going to use a pair of scissors just to adjust it as I go. I find whenever you're starting off on a domestic machine, it tends to feed a little bottom heavy, so that's just something to keep in mind. When you have plenty of thread on your bobbin, you're going to want to cut that extra tail off and then keep going. Now this white piece of plastic that's over here, this plastic piece here will tell the machine when to stop. So it'll start slowing down, it won't spool anymore. That tells you that you have enough thread on your bobbin. I heard it click. That is a good indicator that I shouldn't feed anymore. It was getting close anyway. There's lots of thread on there, so we're just going to clip the thread. We're going to move the spooler and the bracket over and then just pull that off. And now we have our bobbin threaded. Now that we're done threading our bobbin, we're going to rethread the entire machine. Alright, so now what I'm going to do, just to make things a little bit easier for everyone to see on the screen, I'm going to turn this on. This is not recommended to do if you're going to thread your machine. If you are threading your machine with the power on, and you can tell by the light that's here that just came on, make sure that your foot is away from the foot pedal, because you don't want to stab yourself with the needle that's installed on the machine when you're threading the machine. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take this bobbin out. As you can see, this just popped open with me pulling it on it. Don't lose the plate, and you can just pull this out. I'm going to save this for later. This is the top of the throat plate and where the bobbin casing is, so you just pop it out, pull this out, hold this aside, don't lose this, whatever you do. And I'm going to use 2 different colored threads. Now, before we do that, and before we do anything else, I'm going to take a brush and clean out in around the throat plate, the feed dogs, and you could probably see that there's a little bit of lint in here. So I'm gonna just taking a minute to clean this out. Every so often, what you're going to want to do, according to the instructions on the machine, is you're also going to want to remove the throat plate, which is one of the reasons why the screws are there, to take all of this off and clean underneath to make sure you don't have any fuzzies that are stuck. But that's not what we're here for today. We're here for the very first time ever using it. So according to the little label on this plate, it shows the direction of the thread that it goes into the latch and into the bobbin shuttle. So we're going to do what it says on this piece to thread the machine in the right direction. So essentially, if you're looking at it top down, the thread goes in this direction if I was to pull on it. So I'm just going to pop that in, put it through the spring, and set it aside for now. Now that we have the needle threaded, you want to hold on to the tail. That's what the loose bits are called. They're called the tails of the thread. Use your hand wheel to lower the needle into the machine. Do not pull this really tight. You want to hold it a little loose. You're just guiding it in. It's going to loop the thread from the bobbin, and you pull it tight once the needle is up top, which will help you to bring the threads from the bottom up, and then tuck both of them under the presser foot, which is what this part is called. This is called the presser foot. There's a bunch of different presser feet. You can take them off and on either by the presser foot screw, or there is sometimes on the modern ones, like on this machine, where there is a little tab that lets you drop it. And then to put it back on, you lower the presser foot with the presser foot lever to clip it into place, and I tend to hold the spring for the presser foot at the same time. And then just... I thought I had that clipped in there. There we go. Now it's clipped in. Now that the threads are out of the way, you can put the plate back on, which just slides in here. and closes. Now, we are pretty much ready to start sewing. Or are we? There's a couple of things you need to know first. Thank you for joining me today on this sewing adventure with Kira Una's DIY. I am Kira Una. If you happen to like what you see, please like, subscribe, comment, send this video to a friend, family member, or somebody who's just trying to dip their toes into sewing and really needs to know a place to start. I will be making more videos like this for more parts. I didn't want to overwhelm anybody with an info dump, so please be patient as I work on these videos a little bit at a time. Until next time, I'll see you all later. Bye for now. Alright, outro for sewing machine. If you need to just sort of rotate this a little bit and even out the image. Thank you once again for joining me on today's edition of Kira Una's Thank you once again for joining me on the time the fridge decided to kick in as I'm trying to record this outro. Thank you once again for joining us today on trying to film an outro. People, stop banging. Always with the banging. Hashtag apartment living problems. We done? Nope, apparently not. Come on, I'm trying to work here.